we learned over the weekend as Kabul fell to the Taliban is that permanent Washington has been lying to us for a very long time about what's going on in Afghanistan. Glenn Greenwald was not surprised by that. He's been documenting those lies for years. He joins us next to explain what they were.
Hey, Joe Piscopo here.
Guarantee against it.
On One with the Taliban spokesman. Don't miss the critical conversation. Streaming Wednesday only on Fox Nation.
Over the weekend, I felt like the entire country was watching television slack-jawed as the impossible happened.
Only on Fox Nation.
Over the weekend, I felt like the entire country was watching television slack-jawed as the impossible happened. The Taliban swept into Kabul, Afghanistan. No matter how you feel about the occupation, we were very against it. You had to ask yourself, how did this happen, and why wasn't America prepared for it happening? Most people reached the obvious conclusion. They've been lying to us about the state of affairs in Afghanistan, really lying to us for a long time. And by they, we mean not just political figures, but people at the State Department, the Secretary of State, multiple Secretaries of State, and an awful lot of generals at the Pentagon. They haven't been telling us the truth. Now, most people, including everyone on this show, are pretty shocked by that. But not everyone was shocked. Glenn Greenwald has been chronicling this for a long time. He's an independent journalist who writes on Substack. You can read his stuff there, and you should. He joins us tonight. Glenn, thanks so much for coming on. On this and many other subjects, I will say, you've been right. You've been proved right. So you were not surprised to learn that their assessments of what was happening on the ground in Afghanistan were totally false.
Absolutely. You know, I grew up, one of the big events in my childhood that shaped me a lot were the Pentagon Papers, when Danny Ellsberg inside the government leaked to newspapers the fact that the statements being made by the military about the war in Vietnam, we're winning, we have the Viet Cong on the run, were the exact opposite of what they were saying internally, which is there's no way we could possibly win this war. The best we can do is a stalemate. The same thing happened in Afghanistan, but even worse. The argument that was being made all the way back to George Bush was the goal that we have, and we're making great progress, is building an Afghan national security force that will protect the government and democracy and be able to ward off the Taliban, and that way we can leave when they stand on their own feet, which they're very close to doing. Internally, for 20 years, they were saying the Afghan national forces are a joke, they're corrupt, they're illiterate, they have no capacity to fight whatsoever. And 5 weeks ago, Joe Biden stood before the country and said the Afghan national forces are way more powerful than the Taliban. It's extremely unlikely that the Taliban will overrun the country when we leave, when all intelligence and all internal documents showed exactly the opposite. It's not a case where they got it wrong in good faith. It's a case where they deliberately lied to the public to justify this endless war because so many people were profiting from it. All internal documents showed exactly the opposite. It's not a case where they got it wrong in good faith. It's a case where they deliberately lied to the public to justify this endless war because so many people were profiting from it.
So that, I mean, I think you answered the question I was about to ask, which is why would you lie about something that everybody is going to learn about in the end? Like, they had to know they were going to get caught lying because in the end the Taliban did sweep into Kabul. Why, so you think they lied because people were profiting from this exercise, this debacle?
Yeah, the last time I was on your show, one of the last times we talked about why Americans should be spending their resources to fix the government of Cuba. The whole point of America First, as articulated by Donald Trump, was we should focus on American citizens. Why should American citizens risk their lives to determine how Kandahar is governed when instead Americans aren't being governed very well at all, and life expectancy and every other indicia of happiness is declining? And the reason is because there's a tiny segment of people, certain people in the corporate media whose ratings go up, and also the defense contractors who fund both parties, who make a lot of power and a lot of profit, as do the security state services, the Pentagon, the CIA, the NSA, when there's war. And that's what happens is, you know, propaganda is really powerful, right? We see these images of these people desperately trying to get out of Afghanistan, and there's a tendency to say, oh, I want the U.S. to go back and save them. But, you know, we don't see all the people we've killed in Afghanistan who are innocent civilians. That just happens in war, and they control the information that we see to keep us always wanting the next war and to forget what we learned about the prior ones.
God, that's so true. If you'd said this 5 years ago, I'd be like, Glenn Greenwald, nice guy, a little kooky. Now I think you've been proven right. Again, Glenn Greenwald, thank you very much.
Thanks, Tucker. Good to be with you.
You know what kind of president most Americans would really be grateful for in either party? A president who looked at the most basic number of all, which is life expectancy. If Americans are dying younger of causes that are clearly linked to desperation and unhappiness, like suicide, drug OD, diabetes, what we used to call diseases of despair, a president who cared enough about that number, which is the most basic of all numbers, and set about systematically trying to fix it, make Americans live longer, healthier, happier, more meaningful, fulfilling lives. That's all it would take. That person could have all kinds of crackpot views on all kinds of different subjects, but if he did that, he'd be the greatest president in American history. Maybe we'll get one someday. Let's hope. So back to Afghanistan. Unlike a lot of experts you see on TV, Lara Logan has spent an awful lot of time in Afghanistan, lived there during our 20-year war. Today, she joined us for an entire hour on Fox Nation to explain what's been happening. She said it's actually not as complicated as we think. It may be more simple than anyone wants us to know.
What they want you to believe is that Afghanistan is complicated. Because if you complicate it, it's a tactic in information warfare called ambiguity increasing. So now we're all talking about the corruption and the this and the that, and there's all these complex parts. But at its heart, every single thing in the world, in your personal life, professionally, on the global stage, at its heart, it's very simple.
Well, that was an interesting conversation. The cameramen were totally absorbed in it. That doesn't happen very often. Anyways, coming out tomorrow, the full interview on Tucker Carlson Today. And she describes precisely how the public in this country has been lied to about what's happening in Afghanistan. It shocked us, that conversation. It'll be on foxnation.com. So Antifa, they're against